The Pleistocene epoch, commonly known as the Ice Age, was a time when massive ice sheets covered large portions of the Earth, and the climate was far colder and more unstable than it is today. The last 20,000 years of this era, in particular, deeply shaped the way human communities lived. During this period, the weather was harsher than even the coldest regions of today. Most of the northern hemisphere was buried beneath ice that was thousands of meters thick. These glaciers completely covered what are now Canada, northern Europe, and significant parts of Siberia.
Meanwhile, the human population was extremely small. Research suggests that the total number of people living on Earth ranged between 1 and 5 million. In other words, a single modern megacity today has more inhabitants than the entire planet did back then. People lived in small groups. The average size of a community was between 20 and 40 individuals. Some groups of 60 to 80 people are known, but once the population grew beyond that, competition for resources increased and the group typically split.
Daily life was tightly connected to the natural environment. For Homo sapiens living during the Ice Age, the primary mode of survival was hunting and gathering. This lifestyle required constant movement, following seasonal changes and migrating animal herds. When edible plants dwindled or animal herds shifted direction, the group had to relocate as well. The diet of Ice Age humans depended entirely on what the environment could provide. Generally, the most important foods included mammoths.
Large mammals, mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, giant bison, cave bears, horses, and reindeer. Large hunts were extremely valuable because they supplied food for long periods. Small animals, rabbits, foxes, birds, and reptiles. These were crucial when large hunts failed. Roots and tubers. Even though vegetation was limited in the cold, starchy underground plants provided essential energy. Edible nuts. In regions farther from the glaciers, people collected acorns, hazelnuts, and walnuts. Fish and shellfish, essential food sources for groups living near rivers and lakes. Fat, one of the most critical nutrients of the Ice Age. To survive the cold, people needed a large portion of their daily calories to come from fat. This made mammoth fat deposits incredibly valuable. The average daily energy requirement during this period was very high. An adult man likely needed around 4,000 to 5,000 calories per day, while women required 3,000 to 4,000. The extreme cold forced the body to burn more energy to maintain heat. Shelter varied depending on the region. In forested areas, people built tents from wood and animal skins. In treeless tundra regions, they constructed shelters from bones and hides. The mammoth bone houses found in Mezerich, Ukraine, are some of the most remarkable examples. Some of these structures were made from the bones of more than 20 mammoths and were covered with animal skins.
Finding fuel for heating was a major challenge. In polar regions with very few trees, people burned dry grass, animal fats, bones, and dung. Burning bones produced a strong smell but provided long-lasting, steady heat. Social roles within groups were well organized. Young men typically took on hunting, while women and elders handled food processing, plant gathering, child care, and shelter maintenance. However, this division was not strict. In some regions, women also participated in hunts.
Technologically, Ice Age humans were highly inventive. Using stone, bone, antler, and wood, they created spears, spear throwers, stone-cutting tools, knives, ground stone axe-like tools, hide processing instruments. Their clothing was advanced enough to resemble modern cold-weather gear. Layers of leather and fur were stitched together carefully. Wind-resistant surfaces were crafted, and thick hides were wrapped around the feet.
Bone needles, similar to awls, found in archaeological sites, indicate that they had sophisticated sewing techniques. These people were not concerned solely with survival. Their artistic and cultural expression was strong. Cave paintings, especially those in Lascaux and Chauvet, depict the animals they hunted, symbolic shapes, and social rituals. Despite the harsh environment, Ice Age humans made time for meaning, creativity, and identity. Knowledge in these communities was passed down orally. Each generation taught the next about survival skills, hunting, plants, and migration routes. Their memory had to be exceptionally strong. Without writing, any loss of knowledge could endanger the entire group. For a community living with this knowledge, a day was a constant cycle shaped by nature's shifting rhythm. Morning routines were determined by clues gathered from the environment, tracks in the snow, the direction of animal herds, the hardness of the ice, the wind's direction, and the color of the sky. Chapter 2. Morning in the Ice Age. Morning in the Ice Age was nothing like mornings today. Even the way sunlight reached the ground was different. Dense ice crystals in the atmosphere reflected the light in colder, bluer tones. At dawn, the silence felt immense. The vast ice sheets and open tundra left no echoes. Because of this, early human groups had to begin the day with exceptional caution. Temperatures varied greatly by season. During winter, morning temperatures across much of Europe and Asia ranged from -10 degrees Celsius to -35 degrees Celsius. Farther north, they could drop below -40 degrees Celsius. Morning was one of the times when people burned the most energy, as the extreme cold forced their bodies to speed up metabolism and burn more fat to stay warm. For Ice Age humans, the morning routine did not begin with waking up in the modern sense. It began with confirming they had survived the night. Before stepping outside the shelter, they checked wind direction, animal tracks, the density of the snow, sound cues left during the night, humidity levels. The first to wake were usually experienced hunters or elders. Their job was to assess any environmental risks in the early morning, when predators were often still active.
Fire, the center of morning life. The first task of the morning was tending to the fire. For the group, fire was not only a source of warmth, it provided protection from predators, cooked food, melted fats for hide processing, sterilized tools, and served as the center of social life. To prevent the fire from dying completely during the night, glowing embers were buried under ash inside the shelter. In the morning, these embers were revived by adding dry grass and small twigs. In tundra regions where wood was scarce, bone was a common fuel. Burning bones produced thick smoke, but gave off long-lasting, steady heat.
The search for water. Another crucial morning task was finding water. Melting snow was possible, but energy-intensive. Groups usually obtained water from small, unfrozen sections of streams, or from thin layers of water trapped beneath early morning ice sheets. Ice Age people understood how to drink water safely. Instead of consuming it ice cold, they warmed it slightly. Drinking freezing water increased the risk of hypothermia and made digestion more difficult. Morning roles within the community. Although Ice Age groups were small, they maintained a clear social structure. As soon as the group awoke, tasks were divided. Young men preparing for hunting or scouting, women processing roots, plants, nuts, organizing the shelter, children collecting water, gathering small sticks, elders tending the fire, passing on knowledge, weeding environmental signs. Elders were invaluable. They carried essential survival knowledge, animal migration routes, plant harvesting seasons, and dangerous territories. Anthropological findings suggest that having elders in a group could increase survival rates by 20 to 40%. For this reason, many mourning decisions were shaped by their guidance. Animal behavior and mourning tracking. Morning was the best time for hunters and gatherers to observe animal activity. Tracks left in the snow overnight remained intact until dawn, revealing which animals had passed through the area. Hunters would look for signs of reindeer, Rangifer tarandus. Migrating herds moved mostly at dawn and dusk and were a reliable source of meat and fat. Woolly mammoths. Their massive tracks were easy to read in the morning. If they were nearby, it usually meant change direction, not go hunt, due to the extreme risk of mammoth hunting. Giant bison herds. Their tracks appeared as broad depressions in the snow. They were a huge resource for food and fat, but dangerous and difficult to hunt. Wolves and cave lions. These tracks signaled danger, especially for children and injured individuals. Rabbits and small rodents. For gatherers, fresh morning tracks helped locate small animal traps. Plant knowledge, morning signs. Although plant gathering was usually done closer to midday, morning was ideal for reading the condition of plants. The marks plants left on the snow, their frost patterns, and their resistance to cold gave clues about seasonal changes. Swelling of root tubers, color shifts in certain lichens, wind patterns in plant beds, slight changes in snow depth. People of the Ice Age were familiar with plants such as wild carrot-like roots, wild onion species, cold-resistant lichens, stinging nettle varieties, mint-like wild herbs, high-starch root tubers. Since these were difficult to digest raw, they were usually roasted lightly over embers. Chapter 3. Hunting Techniques and Strategies in the Ice Age. Hunting in the Ice Age was one of the essential foundations of human survival. The climate of this era was both harsh and defining. The cold environment dramatically increased caloric needs. For this reason, hunting was not merely a way to acquire food. It was a central structure that sustained the group's energy, provided clothing, supplied raw materials for tools, and maintained social organization. People of the Ice Age developed highly sophisticated tactics to hunt large mammals. Most of what we know today comes from archaeological findings, track analysis, lithic tool structures, and ethnographic comparisons. Below is an extended, slow, and deeply detailed examination of every aspect of Ice Age hunting. The fundamental importance of large game. In the severe climate of the Ice Age, caloric demands were extreme. A single mammoth could feed an entire group for weeks, and its fat was a critical energy source needed for survival in cold conditions. Large animals provided meat, high in protein, could be preserved for long periods. Fat, the most valuable energy resource. Hide and fur for clothing, tent coverings, and various tools. Bone and horn, essential for tool-making. Sinew, used for binding spearheads, securing blades, and sewing. Stomach and organs, used to make water containers, fat storage bags, and cooking pouches. Thus, hunting was not just an activity, it was the central axis of survival.
Target animals and their behaviors. Woolly mammoth, Mammuthus primigenius, the greatest prize of Ice Age hunters. Mammoths migrated over thousands of kilometers each year. Their behavior and migration routes were carefully observed. Moving north in warmer seasons, moving south in colder seasons. Their tracks were highly distinctive, broad depressions in snow or soil. But mammoth hunting was never a direct attack. It always required planning, traps, and strategy.
Woolly rhinoceros, Coleodonta antiquitatis, a solitary and extremely dangerous animal. Its aggressive nature made direct hunting nearly impossible. It was often driven into pit traps. Steppe bison, Bison priscus, lived in fast-moving herds. Risky to hunt, but isolated individuals could be targeted.
Reindeer, Rangifer tarandus, one of the most common prey species. Their migration routes were predictable, providing long-term strategic planning. Horse, Equus ferus, a vital species of the cold steppes, often hunted by driving herds toward cliffs.
Observation skills and accumulated knowledge. For Ice Age humans, hunting was less instinctual and more a science rooted in long-term knowledge. Hunters learned how to read animal tracks, the age of droppings, disturbances in snow, seasonal migration timings, daily movement rhythms, mating periods, behavioral changes under certain winds. This knowledge was passed down through generations. Hunters walked with an almost intuitive awareness in the early morning. Snow thickness determined step depth. Wind direction carried human scent. The sky influenced animal behavior. Ground vibrations signaled herd movement. With such a vast information network, skilled hunters could sense game animals from afar.
Hunting weapons and technology. Ice Age hunters used far more advanced weapons than commonly assumed. 1. Spears. The primary hunting tool. Spearheads were crafted from flint, obsidian, or quartzite, and tightly bound with sinew. 2. Atlatl, spear thrower. One of the most important innovations. It operated as a lever, increasing throwing range 2 to 3-fold and penetration power 5-fold. 3. Bow and arrow, late Pleistocene. Not used everywhere, but present in some groups. Provided faster, safer, long-distance hunting. 4. Cutting tools, used for post-hunt processing. 5. Bone knives, especially effective for cutting tough mammoth hide, which quickly dulled stone blades. Scientific and detailed hunting strategies. Ice Age hunting did not rely on a single method. Instead, hunters used complex strategies. Many of these methods are well supported by archaeological excavations. 1. Drive hunting. One of the most common and effective techniques. Groups slowly compressed animals from a wide area. They used smoke from burning shrubs, barriers made of stones and bones, imitations of predator calls, natural camouflage, circular formations to guide animals. The final destination for the herd could be a cliff edge, a swamp, a narrow pass, pit traps. Especially effective for horses and bison.
Ice surface hunting. Rivers and lakes frequently froze. Animals moved more slowly and lost footing on ice, giving hunters an advantage. Hunters would block escape routes, target thinner ice, wait for the animal's weight to break the surface. Once in freezing water, animals weakened rapidly. Pit traps. Large pits, 1 to 3 meters deep, were dug, covered lightly with branches and snow, used mainly for mammoth and woolly rhinoceros.
Snow advantage. Large animals slowed significantly in deep snow. Hunters positioned themselves in areas with thinner snow for greater mobility. Sound mimicry and directional control. Hunters imitated wolf howls, bear growls, raptor calls. These sounds manipulated animal movement patterns.
Organization of the hunting team. A hunting group usually consisted of 10 to 20 people, each with a designated role. Drivers guided animals in desired directions. Spearmen were primary attackers. Cutters processed the carcass after the kill. Lookouts watched for danger. Trackers interpreted signs and set the route. Veteran hunters took the highest risk positions. If this organization failed, the hunt was unlikely to succeed.
Post-hunt processing. The hunt was the most dangerous stage, but the work did not end there. Processing a mammoth could take 8 to 12 hours. Animal hide bags, sinew ropes, and wooden or bone sleds were used to transport meat. Meat was preserved through immediate consumption, drying, smoking, fat extraction, cooking with heated stones. Hides were dried, bones reserved for tool making, and marrow removed, one of the most valuable nutrients.
Social and cultural dimensions of the hunt. Hunting was not merely a physical act. For Ice Age humans, hunting was tied to social status, communal roles, rituals, spiritual beliefs, solidarity, a culture of sharing. Pre-hunt ceremonies were common. Signs of respect for the animal spirit were often left behind. Cave paintings depicting mammoths, bison, and hunters were not just art. They served as repositories of knowledge. Difficulties and risks of hunting. Hunters faced numerous dangers: animal attacks, sinking into deep snow, falling through ice, predation by large carnivores, blood loss, cold shock, hypothermia on the return journey. Because of these risks, population growth in Ice Age communities was slow. Human physiology in the Ice Age. How did the body survive the cold? Throughout the Ice Age, the Earth was covered by a level of cold far harsher, sharper, and more unforgiving than anything we experience today. While most of the northern hemisphere lay beneath massive ice sheets, humans had to develop both physiological and behavioral adaptations in order to survive. In this long and gentle narration, we will examine, step by step, how Ice Age humans kept their bodies warm, which biological mechanisms sustained them, which adaptations evolved over many generations, and in what ways they differed from modern humans. Body structure of Ice Age humans. Ice Age humans, especially Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, possessed distinct physical traits shaped by cold climates: broader rib cage and greater respiratory capacity. Even though oxygen levels were not different in cold air, maintaining body temperature required higher metabolic activity. For this reason, especially Neanderthals had broad, barrel-shaped rib cages, larger lung volume, and more powerful respiratory muscles. This adaptation allowed the body to draw in more oxygen and generate energy more rapidly. Adaptations of skin and circulation to the cold. Vasoconstriction,
pulling blood away from the skin. When the body encounters cold, its first response is vasoconstriction. This mechanism narrows tiny blood vessels in the skin, pulls blood toward the body's core, and reduces circulation to hands and feet. This protects vital organs, heart, lungs, and brain, at the expense of making fingers and toes feel cold quickly. Ice Age humans experienced this response constantly, and over time developed circulatory systems that reacted more efficiently to the cold.
Fat layers and metabolic adaptation. Brown adipose tissue, brown fat. Ice Age humans had significantly more brown fat than modern people. This special fat burns calories to produce heat, is common in infants and hibernating animals, activates in cold conditions, enables warming without shivering. Therefore, communities exposed to extreme cold had higher proportions of brown fat. This trait is still present today in some Arctic peoples, such as the Inuit and Sami. Muscle mass and energy production. Ice Age humans were more muscular and stronger than modern humans on average. Reasons included constant movement required for hunting, carrying heavy animal hides, high-fat, high-protein diets, heat produced by working muscles, muscles in the cold, consume more glucose, generate more heat, stabilize body temperature. Even at rest, Ice Age humans burned far more energy than we do today. The shivering mechanism. Shivering consists of involuntary muscle contractions that produce intense heat. It is the body's natural automatic response to cold. In Ice Age humans, shivering lasted longer. Muscles fatigued more slowly. Energy use during shivering was more efficient. Even children had strong shivering responses. This provided a critical advantage during icy winds and open-steppe environments. Body proportions. Allen's and Bergman's rules. In cold climates, animals tend to have shorter limbs, broader torsos, thicker bones. According to these biological principles, Ice Age humans were shorter-limbed, wider-hipped, heavier-boned, fuller-faced, and equipped with broader nasal passages. Short limbs reduce heat loss, and wide torsos protect internal organs. Even compared to modern Northern Europeans, Ice Age hunters were far more compact. Nasal structure, warming, freezing, dry air. Cold regions have air that is very dry, very cold, harsh on the lungs. Ice Age humans had taller, longer noses, narrow nasal passages, and dense networks of blood vessels inside. Mucosal tissue that warmed incoming air. Every breath was warmed, humidified, and safely delivered to the lungs. This adaptation was especially pronounced in Neanderthals. Hormonal and metabolic adjustments. Elevated thyroid activity. The thyroid gland becomes more active in cold conditions. This speeds up metabolism, increases energy consumption, boosts heat production. Cold-dwelling populations exhibit higher thyroid activity across generations. Ice Age humans likely experienced this effect continuously. Nutritional physiology. To survive in severe cold, humans needed fat-rich foods, high protein intake, very high daily calories. Ice Age humans consumed 3,000 to 5,000 calories per day, nearly twice the modern average. Fat provided dense energy and supported the formation of brown fat. Daily energy use and resting physiology. In the cold,
The human body burns more energy even while resting. Ice Age humans lost heat during sleep, had elevated nighttime metabolism, maintained deep organ circulation through the night, kept muscles slightly tense to conserve heat. Because of this, before sleeping, they relied on heated stones, animal skins, clustered sleeping arrangements, beds close to the fire. These techniques stabilized their nighttime body temperature.
Genetic adaptations. Some traits of Ice Age humans still exist in modern populations. UCP1 enhances brown fat heat production. LEPR regulates energy storage. TRPM8 affects cold sensation. Different variants of these genes remain active in Arctic-adapted groups today. Psychological and behavioral adaptations. Humans also adapted mentally, not just physically, to the extreme cold. Higher tolerance for cold-induced stress, altered perception of risk, increased threshold for cold exposure, enhanced awareness of wind and weather changes. Ice Age humans lived under constant environmental pressure and learned to interpret even subtle shifts in climate. Shelters and heating techniques in the Ice Age. The sharp, relentless cold of the Ice Age could be felt in every step. The icy winds sweeping across the vast tundra were strong enough not only to freeze a person's skin, but to chill their bones. For Ice Age humans, a shelter was not simply a place to live, it was the primary condition for survival. In this section, we will examine, slowly and in great detail, the types of shelters Ice Age humans built, their heating methods, fire technologies, the materials they used, their strategies for managing warmth, and the evolutionary effects of these practices. Core features of Ice Age shelters. Escaping the cold was impossible. The goal was to manage it. Ice Age shelters did not create true warmth like modern houses. Their purpose was not to fight the cold, but to reduce its impact and help the body preserve its own heat. For this reason, shelters were typically low-ceilinged, narrow at the entrance, positioned according to wind direction, designed to minimize heat loss, built partly underground or very close to the ground. Heat loss was the greatest enemy of the human body. Thus, every aspect of shelter design focused on delaying that loss. Types of Ice Age shelters. Throughout the Ice Age, several shelter types developed, depending on geography, available materials, and cultural traditions. Below are the most common and well-preserved types discovered by archaeologists. Mammoth bone shelters. These shelters were especially common across Eastern Europe, the steppes of present-day Ukraine and Russia. Archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of mammoth bone hut remains. Key features: large mammoth scapulae used as walls, massive mammoth skulls placed at entrances, bones interlocked to form a dome-like structure, covered with thick animal skins, gaps filled with dry grass, mud, or packed snow, a central hearth for fire. These shelters were surprisingly resistant to cold. Mammoth bones were durable and blocked the wind effectively. Inside these shelters, archaeologists often find river stones, burn marks, flint tools, piles of animal bones, indicating that they were used for long periods. Wood and branch huts. In forested regions, mammoth bones were not available. Instead, people used tree trunks and thick branches. These shelters used dome-shaped frames, used interwoven branches as a structural skeleton,
were covered with thick layers of fur and were insulated with packed snow. Snow, contrary to appearance, is an excellent insulator because it traps air within its structure.
Semi-subterranean shelters. The best way to stay warm is to move underground. Soil temperature is more stable than air temperature, making these shelters very protective. Semi-subterranean shelters typically included a pit dug 1 to 2 meters deep, reinforced walls of wood and stone, a roof of wood and animal skin, an entrance placed opposite the wind, and a smoke outlet at the top. This design is considered a precursor to traditional Inuit dwellings.
Snow shelters, primitive igloo forms. Fully constructed igloos as we know them were not common in the Ice Age. However, temporary snow-dug shelters were used. These were for emergencies or 1 to 2 nights, blocked wind entirely, stayed surprisingly warm inside. Once compacted, snow can become almost as strong as stone. Intelligent heat-conserving designs. The architecture of these shelters included surprisingly advanced heat management concepts. Low ceilings. Warm air rises. The higher the ceiling, the faster heat escapes. Therefore, most Ice Age shelters had ceilings so low that people couldn't fully stand upright. Double-layered skin coverings. Much like modern tents, 2 layers of hides were used, trapping an insulating pocket of air between them. This significantly improved protection from wind and cold, especially with reindeer hide. Windbreak walls. Around the shelter, people placed stone walls, stacked bark, piles of bones. The purpose was to break the wind before it reached the shelter. Heating techniques. The Ice Age heat strategy. Producing heat and preserving heat were 2 different tasks. Fire-making technologies. Fire was the most valuable tool of Ice Age humans. Techniques differed by region, but common methods included flint plus pyrite, marcasite. A strong spark forms when flint strikes pyrite, igniting dry grass. Bow drill method. Using friction and string tension to create an ember. Hand drill. Manual rotation of a stick, simple but effective. Ice Age people were fire masters. Control over fire was more important than skill in hunting. Fire pits. Fires were often made in pits, not in the open. Why? Smoke vented more predictably. Heat didn't blow away. Stone linings absorbed heat and released it slowly. The pit stayed warm until morning.
Hot stone technique. This was one of the era's most efficient heating systems. Method. Heat stones in the fire. Place them in a container or pit inside the shelter. The stones radiate heat for hours. Replace them as needed. Still used in some Siberian communities today.
Animal hides as insulation. Reindeer hide was the gold standard of the Ice Age. Advantages. Fur traps air. Skin blocks wind. Thick, water-resistant. Lightweight, yet warm. Bear hide was warmer but too heavy. Wolf hide was lighter but less insulating. Reindeer hide offered the perfect balance. Layered clothing system. Ice Age clothing followed a layered structure. Inner layer, soft skin. Middle layer, thick fur. Outer layer, wind-blocking hide. Trapped air between layers maintained warmth. Nighttime heating strategies. Night was the most dangerous time.
The body cooled rapidly in the dark and wind. Night strategies included sleeping in groups, 10 to 20 people together, tightly packed arrangements, placing children in the center, forming semicircles around fire pits, using hot stones under blankets, sleeping in smaller spaces to trap heat. These methods significantly reduced infant mortality.
The heat economy of the Ice Age. Warmth was a resource. Every choice was an energy calculation. Where will the shelter be built? From which direction does the wind blow? Which way does the entrance face? How much wood does the fire consume? How far must they travel to gather wood? How many clothing layers are needed? How will hides be processed? How many people should sleep together? These were engineering decisions in every sense.
Evolutionary effects of heating and shelter. Battling cold shaped human evolution. Tougher skin, increased fat storage ability, shifts in body hair texture, circulation adaptations in hands and feet, elongated nasal structures, stronger thyroid activity, more muscular bodies. Shelter and heating technology supported these adaptations. Division of labor within the community. Shelter building required teamwork. Men carried heavy materials. Women processed hides. Children gathered dry plants. Elders prepared charcoal. Hunters secured the surroundings. This efficient system allowed populations to grow even in harsh environments.
Daily life in Ice Age communities. Daily life in Ice Age communities was not limited to hunting and gathering alone. Just as survival mattered, maintaining harmony within the group was equally essential. Even a small conflict could endanger the entire community in such harsh environmental conditions. For this reason, the day, starting with the morning planning, progressed in a structured way, not only physically, but also socially.
Division of labor and specializations within the community. Every individual had a specialty, a particular area of skill. Ice Age societies were far more organized than we often imagine. The harsh lifestyle encouraged not an everyone does everything mentality, but rather a system in which each person focused on what they did best. Major specializations included master hunters. These individuals determined strategies for large hunts and were highly skilled at reading animal tracks. They were usually over 30 years old, those who had survived many winters and gained deep experience. Stone knappers, or flint knappers, experts in tool making. They shaped flint, obsidian, and quartzite with precise angles to create sharp edges. The better the tools, the higher the success in hunting.
Hide workers, responsible for drying, softening, sewing, waterproofing, and maintaining animal hides. Plant and root specialists, women and elders who knew which plants were edible and which were poisonous. This knowledge was essential for long-term survival. Healers, they made medicine from plants, treated wounds, set broken bones, and cared for those with fever, forming the earliest roots of medical practice. Storytellers, though it may seem simple, their role was vital. They preserved the community's memory, protected language, and taught children essential survival knowledge. These specializations quietly shaped and organized the daily rhythm of the group.
Communication, language, and sign systems. The Age-Ice humans' language was not simple. There is no evidence that their languages were primitive or underdeveloped. On the contrary, their complex hunting strategies and social structures required an advanced communication system. Their languages likely included a large vocabulary for describing nature,
many terms related to animal behavior, detailed expressions for kinship, specialized words for wind, snow, ice, and weather, short command-like words for cooperative tasks. Anthropologists suggest that because frozen environments carried sound farther, people spoke in lower tones and more calmly. This created a noticeable quietness in daily life.
Sign language was common. Speaking during a hunt was dangerous, so they relied on hand signals, facial expressions, head movements, placing specific stones, bones, or branches in meaningful patterns. Throughout the day, everyone had to watch for even the smallest gestures from others.
Conflict and problem resolution. Because communities were small, any conflict posed a significant threat. Therefore, the culture of disagreement was extremely controlled. Common methods of resolving issues included talking around the fire with elders acting as mediators, one person apologizing and the matter being set aside, sleeping in separate shelters for a few days, temporary changes in assigned duties, rearranging shared resources. Excluding a member was extremely rare. Losing even one person meant losing vital manpower. For this reason, solidarity was the foundation of Ice Age survival. Illnesses and healing methods. Cold climates brought unique health problems. The most common issues were frostbite, injuries, dental infections, starvation-related weakness, respiratory infections, parasites. Healing methods included herbal remedies, wild onions and garlic to treat infection. Willow bark is the natural painkiller that contains salicin. Mint and thyme-like herbs were used for digestive relief. Tree resin was applied to seal wounds. Animal fats were used to retain warmth, prevent skin cracking, and sometimes applied directly to inflamed areas. Hot stone therapy. Stones were heated in the fire and wrapped in hide and applied to painful areas. Community support. Perhaps the most crucial healing method. A sick person was never left alone. Their duties were immediately taken over by others.
Daily routines inside the shelter. The interior of a shelter was more active and organized than one might expect. Daily tasks included repairing hides, sharpening tools, processing roots and plants, packing dried meat, teaching children, cleaning small animals caught in traps, maintaining the fire. Everything had a designated place: stone tools on one side, meat storage in another area, hide working zone near the entrance, sleeping area in the warmest section. This organization increased their chances of survival.
Migration preparations and route planning. Ice Age communities were not settled. They migrated throughout the year. Migration decisions usually depended on the movement of reindeer herds, plant seasons, the freezing and thawing of rivers, hunting conditions, and the depletion of a sheltering area. Preparations for migration took days. Hide tents were dismantled. Belongings were loaded onto bone-framed sleds. Meat stores were repacked. Hunters scouted the route. Elders walked at the back. Children were placed in the safest spots. Long migrations were stressful but necessary.
The final phase of night: silence, fire, and watchfulness. Once darkness fell, deep silence spread across the community. Conversations shortened. People communicated through gestures and whispers.
Because night was the time when cave lions, wolf packs, and giant bears were most active. The protective glow of the fire formed a small circle of safety. The group arranged themselves around it in a semicircle. Sleep came in light waves. No one slept deeply, and there was always someone on watch. The flickering shadows on the cave walls sometimes brought back memories of the day's hunt, and sometimes the stories of ancestors seemed to come alive again in the moving light. This rhythm was a natural part of daily life for Ice Age people. Daily life of Ice Age communities. Daily life in Ice Age communities was built upon adapting to ever-changing natural conditions. Survival in this era required not only physical strength, but also deep environmental awareness, efficient use of resources, the ability to sense risks, and the skill of functioning as a cohesive group. Below is a much more detailed and scientifically grounded explanation of different aspects of this lifestyle. Daily routine, a schedule built around survival. For Ice Age people, a daily routine was nothing like the time-regulated system we know today. The flow of the day depended entirely on sunlight, temperature, the movement of prey animals, the status of fuel supplies, the safety of the camp. Morning routine. The day usually began before dawn. There were several reasons. The safest and most productive hunting time was early morning. Cold night temperatures increased the risk of the campfire dying out, so the first priority was to revive it. Any snow or ice that had accumulated around the camp overnight needed to be cleared. Typical early morning tasks included checking the embers and restarting the fire using dry grass or fatty animal scraps. Drying leather clothing. Damp garments were dangerous in the cold. Sharing leftover food and planning the day. Inspecting the camp perimeter. Predators could have wandered in during the night. Social roles and division of labor. Gender-flexible work patterns. Archaeological and anthropological evidence shows that Ice Age societies did not have rigid gender roles. There is strong evidence that women also hunted and that men also collected food. A general but flexible division looked like this. Men, big game hunting, long-distance scouting, crafting spearheads and stone blades. Women, plant gathering, small game hunting, preparing hides, maintaining the fire, organizing the camp. Children, learning, gathering firewood, small tasks. Elders, sharing knowledge, tracking environmental patterns, planning migration and hunting routes. Elders were the strategic minds of the community. They knew where mammoths passed, which valleys' winds threatened the camp, and which cliffs held quality flint. This knowledge was oral. There was no writing. Nutrition. Managing energy and calories. Ice Age humans needed 3,500 to 4,500 calories per day to survive extreme cold. Failing to meet this requirement could result in deadly hypothermia. A meat-based diet. Due to harsh climates, plant diversity was limited, so the diet relied heavily on animals. Primary food sources: mammoth, bison, various deer species, woolly rhinoceros, wild horses, small animals like rabbits, birds, otters, bone marrow, fat-rich organ meats, critical for survival. Fat was king in a freezing environment. Mammoth fat, in particular, was a vital source of energy. Plant foods. During warmer interglacial periods, communities gathered wild onions, root vegetables, wild berries, edible nuts, and seaweed for coastal groups. Food processing techniques. Drying. Meat was sliced thin and preserved in the cold. Freezing. Nature acted as a natural freezer. Smoking. Protected meat and fish from bacteria. Extracting bone marrow. Provided extremely high energy. Tools and everyday items. Tool making. A portion of each day was dedicated to crafting or repairing tools, an essential survival practice. Main tools included flint knives, sharpened spearheads, bone needles, awls and scrapers, resin fiber adhesives, axes and chisels. Tool making often served as a group learning activity. Personal items. Findings show remarkable artistic expression. Necklaces, carved bone symbols, ornaments made from animal teeth, horn figurines. These were not merely decorative. Many had spiritual, symbolic, or status-related roles. Sleeping, a strategic defense against the cold. Sleep itself was a survival strategy. Insulation techniques. Digging pits filled with grass. Sleeping in piles of furs. Sharing body heat. Building windbreaks from stones or bones. Sleep was not continuous. Some group members kept night watch. Migration and mobility. Ice Age groups were semi-nomadic, so daily life often involved movement. Daily decisions included stay or move camp. Did hunting routes shift? Is firewood scarce? Are predator tracks increasing? Migration decisions were vital. Being in the wrong valley at the wrong time could be fatal. Social life, communication, and rituals. Language and communication. Evidence suggests Ice Age humans had a complex language comparable to ours. Language was used for hunting strategy, warning signals, social bonding, teaching, and ritual practices. The campfire ritual. Fire was the heart of community life, emotionally and physically. Around the fire, stories were told, rituals honoring ancestors were performed, hunting strategies were discussed, and children were taught skills. Fire was the emotional core of society. Art, music, and symbolism. Cave paintings. Most cave art depicted aspects of daily life, hunting scenes, animal herds, abstract symbols, possibly ritual or communicative. Music. Aurignacian flutes show that early humans had rhythm, melody, and a musical culture. Conflict and cooperation. Intergroup relations were complex. Sometimes groups shared resources. Sometimes competition led to conflict. In some areas, groups cooperated to build large traps. Cooperation was essential. Without it, hunting mammoths was impossible. Childhood and education. Children learned early. Spear throwing, tracking animals, identifying plants, controlling fire. Education was hands-on. Even play prepared them for adulthood. Illness and health management. Common problems included frostbite, broken bones, soft tissue injuries, infections, parasites, food poisoning, vitamin deficiencies, especially vitamin C. Treatments were herbal remedies, willow bark for pain relief, bone splints, fire sterilization, sealing wounds with animal fat, rest. Healed fractures show that communities cared for their injured. Art, music, and symbolism. Cave paintings. Most cave art depicted aspects of daily life: hunting scenes, animal herds, abstract symbols, possibly ritual or communicative. Music. Aurignacian flutes show that early humans had rhythm, melody, and a musical culture. Conflict and cooperation. Intergroup relations were complex. Sometimes groups shared resources. Sometimes competition led to conflict. In some areas, groups cooperated to build large traps. Cooperation was essential. Without it, hunting mammoths was impossible. Trade and communication networks between Ice Age communities. The Ice Age, especially the Upper Paleolithic period, roughly 50,000 to 10,000 BCE, was not merely a time when hunter-gatherer groups struggled to survive. It was also the era in which humanity formed its first long-distance trade routes, cultural interaction systems, and communication networks. These networks resembled the trade routes of later civilizations, but were far more natural, flexible, and socially driven. In this section, we will examine in detail how Ice Age people exchanged goods, what materials they transported, which symbolic systems they used to communicate, and how these networks shaped human evolution. Why trade? Uneven distribution of resources in a harsh world. Environmental conditions in the Ice Age were extremely irregular. Some regions had rich flint deposits, lay on reindeer migration routes, were filled with mammoth bones, offered coastal access to marine resources, and had high-quality obsidian near glacial edges. This unevenness made intergroup exchange essential. Trade was an extension of survival. Primary trade materials. Archaeological evidence shows that some materials were transported hundreds or even thousands of kilometers. These can be grouped into three categories. Raw materials for tool making. Flint, the most commonly traded resource. It was the backbone of cutting tool production. Flint found hundreds of kilometers from its source is a frequent discovery. Obsidian, or volcanic glass, produces extremely sharp blades. Isotope analysis can pinpoint its exact origin. Some obsidian artifacts were transported over 700 kilometers, notably in Inner Asia and Central Europe. Quartzite and jasper used for spear points, scrapers, and drills. Ornaments and symbolic goods. These items likely held social or ritualistic value rather than economic. Seashells found in caves far from the coast. Animal teeth, bear, wolf, mammoth. Ivory beads, bone carvings, worked feathers, red ochre. These were used as status symbols, tools for strengthening social bonds, ritual and burial objects, markers of leadership. Food and animal products. Although food was rarely moved long distances, nearby groups exchanged dried meat, fatty bone sections, animal hides, long bones containing precious marrow, bags of rendered fat, and dried fish from coastal groups to inland groups. These were vital during scarcity. Methods of exchange. No money, but plenty of trade. Trade in the Ice Age was not commercial in the modern sense. It relied on barter and reciprocal gift-giving. Direct barter. When two groups met, one group might offer high-quality obsidian, the other would give mammoth hide or dried meat. The exchange depended on mutual needs. Gift economy. Anthropologists argue that early human societies often used a gift-based system. Goods were given without immediate expectation, but created a social obligation to reciprocate later. This system preserved peace, strengthened group interdependence, and fostered mutual respect. It is known as a reciprocal sacrifice economy.
Kinship-based trade. Groups often exchanged individuals through marriage, creating extended family networks. These networks made trade safer, facilitated travel, and maintained long-term alliances. Trade routes, the Ice Age's invisible maps. Although they lacked drawn maps, Ice Age people understood their environment exceptionally well. They memorized animal migration routes, river valleys, glacier edges, natural passes, flint sources, safe camping areas. This knowledge was passed down through generations. Europe's oldest known trade network. Archaeological finds suggest obsidian found in France's Dordogne region originates from the Lipari Islands in Italy, approximately 1,200 kilometers away. Seashells found in Central European caves originated from Mediterranean coasts. This proves Ice Age humans were far more connected than previously believed. Trade across Inner Asia. In Siberia and Central Asia, long-distance transport included mammoth ivory, bone ornaments, obsidian, reindeer hides, and arrowheads. Some beads found in North Asia are traced to Central Asia, suggesting routes up to 3,000 kilometers. Trade in the Americas. Even the Clovis culture, CE 13,000 BCE, transported obsidian, projectile points, and seashells over hundreds of kilometers. Communication, languages, symbols, and sign systems. Trade involved not just goods, but information and language exchange. Language capabilities. Ice Age humans had the same FOXP2 gene we use for speech, modern vocal anatomy, advanced brain structures. This makes it highly likely they had complex spoken languages. Universal symbols. Certain cave symbols, zigzags, triangles, handprints, hunting signs, appear consistently across continents. Possible explanations: a shared cultural root, frequent intergroup contact, gradual standardization of symbols. Gestures and body language. While trading, gestures were essential. Pointing at items, showing quantities with fingers, indicating animal directions, expressing peaceful intentions. Many of these gestures still exist in modern hunter-gatherer groups. Enter group peace, diplomacy, and conflict management. To maintain trade, groups developed peace agreements, ritual gift exchanges, reciprocal visits, cooperative hunts. Example: cooperative mammoth hunts. Two groups chasing the same herd would often build a trap together, share the kill. This strengthened both social and economic ties. Challenges of long-distance travel. Trading meant risk. Travelers faced freezing winds, starvation, predators, floods or avalanches, encounters with hostile groups, navigation failures, breaking ice fields. Thus, only experienced hunters undertook long trade journeys. Trade's impact on human evolution. Scientific studies show trade and cultural interaction played a major role in knowledge exchange. Groups learned from each other, fire-carrying techniques, spear designs, hide processing methods, rituals, and art styles. Genetic diversity. Intergroup marriages, mixed gene pools, increased genetic resilience.
This is one of the key reasons Homo sapiens flourished. Expansion of social structures. Trade created lasting bonds between groups, eventually forming large coalitions, foundations of modern society. Summary. Trade and communication in the Ice Age. Ice Age humans were far more connected, highly social, eager to share knowledge, geographically knowledgeable, surprisingly cooperative. Trade was not just exchange of goods, but a cultural, technological, genetic, and social interaction network. In the harsh and unpredictable Ice Age world, humans survived because they connected with one another.
Gender relations in the Ice Age, social roles, mating systems, and daily life dynamics. Throughout the Ice Age, especially 50,000 to 10,000 BCE, human social structure was based on small communities. These groups typically consisted of core groups of 20 to 50 people, loose bands of 80 to 150 individuals that merged or separated seasonally, and wider networks connected through family ties, kinship, and marriage. Within this structure, relationships between men and women were shaped primarily by the necessities of survival.
The foundation of gender roles, a survival strategy. The most defining feature of the Ice Age was its challenging environment: cold climate, dangerous megafauna, limited plant diversity, constant migration. Because of these hardships, there was a clear division of labor between men and women. However, this division was not rigid.
Primary roles of men: participating in large hunts, scouting and exploring the region, defending the group, tool production, especially spears, arrowheads, obsidian knapping, long-distance travel. Primary roles of women: gathering plants, roots, and tubers, processing hides and producing clothing, child care, organizing the shelter, small game hunting and trap setting, tending the fire, healing with medicinal plants. A crucial fact often overlooked: women were the main providers of the community's food security. Around 60 to 70% of all calories came from roots, seeds, small animals, and processed foods, mostly gathered or prepared by women. Thus, women's knowledge acted as the group's true survival insurance. Mating systems: monogamy or polygamy? Archaeology cannot give perfectly certain answers, but comparisons with modern hunter-gatherers suggest that Ice Age humans displayed a mix of systems. General trend: pair-bonded, mostly monogamous relationships. Because childcare was extremely demanding, infant mortality was high, hunting was risky, long pregnancy, 9 months, and long dependency period, 3 to 5 years, required parental cooperation. But the system was flexible. Polygyny occurred occasionally, especially if a skilled hunter held high status. Widows or widowers often remarried quickly. Marriages between kin groups helped maintain peace. So while monogamy was common, the system adapted to the realities of survival. How were partnerships formed? Unlike modern romantic concepts, relationships were shaped mostly by skill, hunting and survival abilities in men, plant knowledge, hide preparation, and food processing in women. A skilled partner greatly increased survival chances. Health and physical endurance. Harsh environments made strength and resilience essential criteria. Kinship.
Marriages often strengthened alliances between groups. Social harmony. Individuals who cooperated well and fit into group life were preferred. Romantic love, as we know it, is modern, but anthropological evidence shows emotional bonds certainly existed.
Status balance between men and women. Ice Age societies showed no strict hierarchy where one gender dominated the other. In fact, as in many hunter-gatherer societies, mutual dependence fostered equality. For example, without women's plant knowledge, the group would starve. Without men's hunting skills, essential fats and proteins would be lacking. Their skills complemented each other, creating a balanced system. Thus, Ice Age communities were relatively egalitarian.
Daily interaction between men and women. Daily routines shaped gender dynamics. Morning. Men prepared for hunting or scouting. Women handled fire, water, and food tasks. Short communal planning meetings took place. Midday. Men actively hunted. Women gathered plants. Children learned alongside women. Evening. Gathering around the fire. Hunters returned. Food was shared. Storytelling and knowledge transfer. The fire circle was the center of social interaction.
Childcare and family structure. The strongest bond between men and women appeared in shared childcare. Ice Age children were raised by the entire community. Men became heavily involved in education after age 2, teaching hunting, tracking, tool use, shelter construction. Women taught plant knowledge, camp organization, and medicinal skills. Children were the natural unifying force within relationships.
Sexuality and reproductive strategies. In Ice Age societies, sexuality served multiple functions: reproduction, bonding, social cohesion, conflict reduction. Anthropological data suggests highly polygynous males were rare. Even great hunters had heavy responsibilities. No formal birth control existed. Long breastfeeding intervals naturally spaced pregnancies. Extramarital relations were possible in some groups. Women had considerable bodily autonomy. Coercive behaviors threatened social harmony and were not tolerated.
Evolutionary impact of gender relations. These social structures had major evolutionary consequences. Long-term partnerships increased child survival. Division of labor led to cognitive specialization between genders. Family structure accelerated language development. Social networks expanded trade and cultural exchange. Gender relations were thus both social and evolutionary systems. Short summary. Ice Age societies tended toward egalitarian relationships. Monogamy was common but flexible. Partner choice was based on skill and endurance. Cooperation between genders was essential for survival. Childcare was a shared responsibility. These dynamics shaped human evolution and cultural development.
Rituals, belief systems, and burial traditions in the Ice Age. During the Ice Age, the Pleistocene period, particularly between 100,000 and 12,000 years ago, human groups developed complex rituals, belief systems, and symbolic practices related to death, both to survive and to make sense of the world around them. These practices were essential tools that strengthened social bonds, reinforced group identity, and shaped their relationship with nature. In this section, we dive deeply into the spiritual world of Ice Age humans, their perception of death, community rituals, ancestral reverence, shamanic traditions, and burial customs guided by scientific findings.
Foundations of belief systems in the Ice Age.
Ice Age humans believed that just as they experienced the physical world, an invisible realm also existed around them. Three major factors shaped these beliefs. Dependence on nature. Since survival depended entirely on nature, people believed that the wind, snow, migrating animals, the sun and moon, storms, and water sources all had spirits. Nature was not just a physical environment, it was a living force with will, anger, and generosity. Thus, many rituals aimed to appease nature, ensure abundance, and bring hunting luck.
Ancestor reverence. Most Ice Age humans believed that some form of existence continued after death. Therefore, they buried their dead carefully, placed valuable objects in graves, sometimes painted bones, and dug special burial pits. This reflected a belief that ancestors protected the community and guided the living.
The soul and life force. Like many hunter-gatherer groups today, Ice Age humans believed every living being had a life force or soul. They believed this soul could leave the body during sleep, left permanently at death, and traveled to other worlds during dreams. This made dreams and trance states sacred. Rituals in the Ice Age, the social glue of communities. For Ice Age humans, rituals were not only religious, they were essential for maintaining group unity. Through rituals, responsibilities were shared, morale was raised before hunts, community bonds were strengthened, and knowledge was passed to younger generations. Hunting rituals. Hunting rituals were the most common type. Their purpose was to ask permission from animal spirits, ensure a successful hunt, prevent accidents, and focus the group mentally. Methods included dancing around fire, imitating animals like mammoth, bison, or reindeer, drawing cave paintings, shamans entering trances, blessing hunting tools, and wearing animal skins or horns. The famous paintings of Lascaux, Altamira, and Chauvet are widely considered part of such rituals, not merely art, but magical acts. Shamanic rituals. Most Ice Age communities likely had a shaman or spiritual mediator. Shamans healed illnesses, banished evil spirits, tried to foresee hunting outcomes, and managed the spiritual whereabouts of missing people. Their attire often included feathers, animal skins, claws, bones, bells, and face paint. These objects were believed to ease passage into the spirit world. Rites of passage. Although less frequent, rites of passage were deeply significant. Adolescent rituals often included being sent alone into the forest or mountains, spending a night alone, tracking animals, body marking or painting. These rituals symbolized acceptance into the adult community.
Death and burial traditions in the Ice Age. Ice Age burial practices provide crucial evidence for symbolic thinking and belief in an afterlife. Why did they bury their dead? Both Homo sapiens and Neanderthals buried their dead. Reasons likely included ensuring the soul's peaceful journey, protecting the body from predators, strengthening social unity. Features of Ice Age graves. Typical elements included pit burials, stone-lined graves, red ochre, grave goods, and burials with animal bones. Red ochre. Red ochre is one of the most fascinating components of these burials. It symbolized blood, life, birth, rebirth. Thus, many bodies were sprinkled with red earth. Grave goods, a life that continues after death. It was believed the dead would need items in the afterlife.
Common grave goods included spear points, tooth necklaces, arrowheads, stone tools, food pieces, bone bracelets, leather pouches. These items reveal the person's status or role. For example, hunters varied spears. Shamans varied masks and rattling objects. Women varied beads or stone vessels. Children's graves. Children's burials often show the most emotional care. Findings include tiny beads, small animal figurines, carefully arranged bones. This reflects the high value placed on children.
Symbolism and art of the Ice Age. Most Ice Age art is intertwined with ritual. Cave paintings. Possible purposes. Hunting magic. Communication with nature spirits. Collective memory. Teaching tool. Common animals are mammoth, bison, lion, horse, reindeer, bull, bear. Human figures are rare. Humans saw themselves as part of nature, not above it.
Animal spirit beliefs. A common belief among Ice Age groups. The animal's soul must also be hunted, not just its body. Thus, the animal's head faced the sun. Bones were not broken. Remains were placed in sacred spots. Mammoth and bison bone arrangements support this idea. Shamanic trance rituals. During rituals, shamans entered trance through rhythmic drumming or breathing. Claimed to travel to the spirit world. Cave art showing human-animal hybrids, horned human figures, masked shapes, likely represents shamanic transformation. Shamans were believed to fly, take on animal form, speak with the dead, belief in life after death. Ice Age humans typically believed in two realms, the world of the living and the spirit world, where ancestors and animal spirits lived. Burial traditions reflect this belief. Body orientation, grave goods, red ochre, and animal bones. Rituals as the memory system of the community. Rituals maintained social order, strengthened family ties, passed knowledge to new generations, created unity, taught survival strategies. Without rituals, the resilience of small hunter-gatherer groups would have been far weaker. Thus, rituals were as essential as fire, shelter, and hunting. The evolution of art and community identity in the Ice Age. Cultural depths of the Pleistocene era. Human communities living during the Ice Age were not simply primitive beings struggling to survive. On the contrary, they possessed a remarkably rich, symbolic, and community-centered cultural world. Art, cave paintings, stone carvings, bone decorations, figurines, pigments, ritual objects, was both a reflection of this cultural structure and a vehicle through which it was carried forward. Below, we explore in comprehensive detail how Ice Age art emerged, why it developed, how it shaped community identity, and how it transformed the human mind.
The emergence of art, a revolution in the human mind. The roots of Ice Age art stretch back roughly 100,000 to 40,000 years ago. This period marks the rise of human cognitive capacity and the deepening of abstract thought. Three primary factors pave the way for the emergence of art: abstract thinking and symbolic expression. Homo sapiens and some Neanderthal groups began to represent not only the things they saw, but also ideas, beliefs, and emotions. This is one of the greatest cognitive leaps in human history. A single animal silhouette on a cave wall represented not just that animal, but concepts such as fertility, hunting luck, the spiritual world, the shared identity of the community, communication within the group. Art also functioned as a method of transmitting knowledge. Through images, younger generations could learn about animal behavior, hunting tactics, dangerous areas, migration routes.
Creating a shared identity. Artworks allowed groups to say, "This is who we are." Communities developed their own symbols, motifs, and stylistic choices, distinguishing themselves from others. Thus, for Ice Age humans, art was not merely aesthetic, it was the core of social identity. The birth of cave art. The silent cathedrals of the ancient world. The paintings in France's Lascaux and Chauvet caves, Spain's Altamira, or Indonesia's Sulawesi caves are considered some of the earliest masterpieces of humankind. Why caves? Because caves offered echoing acoustics, enveloping darkness, lofty cathedral-like ceilings, natural spaces suitable for communal rituals. These caves were essentially ritual sanctuaries. Soot and charcoal remnants show that people used torches, oil lamps, or stone lanterns to illuminate the walls while creating their art. Characteristics of the paintings. Most cave paintings depict mammoths, bison, lions, horses, and reindeer. These animals were drawn not only for hunting knowledge, but because they were sacred, powerful, and central to ritual life. Human figures are rare, reflecting a worldview in which humans saw themselves as part of nature, not above it.
Techniques of Ice Age artists. The science behind Stone Age art. Early artists possessed surprisingly advanced techniques. Materials included red ochre, iron oxide, yellow ochre, charcoal, manganese, clay-rich soil, animal fat, bone powder, and marrow. The paints were applied using twig brushes, bundles of feathers, fingers, bone spray tubes.
The spray painting technique. Hand stencils show that artists placed their hand against the wall and sprayed pigment by blowing through a hollow bone. This method resembles modern graffiti more than expected. Use of perspective. Some horses in Lascaux are drawn from two different perspectives, proving that Ice Age artists were observant, thoughtful, and technically skilled. Sculptures and figurines, objects of identity and belief. The most famous Ice Age sculptures are the Venus figurines, women depicted with exaggerated hips, prominent breasts, and rounded bodies. These likely symbolized fertility, feminine power, and the community's belief in life and abundance. Some scholars suggest they also served as identity symbols for women within these societies. Small animal figurines. Tiny mammoths, lions, and deer carved from stone or bone have been discovered. These may have been charm objects, tools for hunting rituals, or teaching models for children. The social role of art, building community identity. Art reinforced the identity of Ice Age groups. Belonging to a group, each tribe or community had its own motifs, painting styles, symbolic objects, and ritual tools. These acted as a kind of identity card when encountering other groups. A tool for knowledge transfer. Through artistic depictions, children learn to hunt, recognize plants, understand animal behavior, and read signs in nature. Emotional connection. Art created emotional cohesion within the community through mourning symbols, images related to hunting losses, drawings made for birth or coming-of-age rituals. The ritual role of art, representing the sacred. Much of Ice Age art is linked to shamanic practices, shamanic imagery. Some caves include human-animal hybrid figures, horned people, bodies depicted as if flying. These likely symbolized the shaman's journey into the spirit world. Hunting magic. Certain drawings may have been created during pre-hunt rituals aimed at capturing the spirit of the animal, calling future hunts, increasing the success of the hunt. Hence the frequent depiction of wounded animals. The evolution of art in the Ice Age. Art deepens as the mind develops. The progression of Ice Age art can be seen in 3 major stages. Stage 1. Simple engravings, 100,000 to 60,000 years ago. Early Homo sapiens and Neanderthal markings. Stage 2. Symbolic objects, 60,000 to 40,000 years ago. Beads, pigment use, carved patterns. Stage 3. Cultural explosion, 40,000 to 12,000 years ago. Cave paintings, figurines, ritual art, complex symbolic language. The evolution of art paralleled the development of the human mind throughout the Ice Age. Art's role in shaping community identity. In Ice Age societies, art created unity, reinforced rituals, served as an educational tool, preserved collective memory, conveyed hunting strategies, established identity symbols, embodied spiritual beliefs. Thus, art was not merely a painting or sculpture. It was the memory and identity of the community. Climate shifts and human migration in the Ice Age. The Ice Age, the Pleistocene epoch, was a long era shaped by sharp climatic fluctuations. Temperatures could change dramatically even within short periods. Glaciers expanded or retreated rapidly. These rises and falls deeply affected human lifeways and constantly pushed communities toward new regions. Because in the Ice Age, survival depended not on staying in one place, but on movement, on adapting to a world in constant flux.
Sudden warming and cooling cycles. Scientists know that the Ice Age climate was marked by rapid warming and cooling phases, called Danskad-Ashgar events. At times, temperatures could rise by 5 to 10 degrees Celsius within just a few decades. Then a cooling wave would return and ice sheets would advance once more. These abrupt changes disrupted the migration routes of animal herds. Reindeer, bison, mammoths, and horses shifted in search of new grazing lands. Humans had no choice but to follow them.
Migration in the footsteps of herds. Since Ice Age humans were hunter-gatherers, the routes of large animal herds were essentially the routes of people. Thus, when herds moved south, humans migrated toward warmer regions. When glaciers retreated, people spread into the newly opened lands. This constant mobility forced human groups to observe their environment closely, remain flexible, and adapt their strategies quickly. Major waves of migration. Some migrations completely changed the course of human history. 1. Out of Africa. Around 70,000 years ago, during a relatively mild climatic phase, Homo sapiens left Africa and spread into Asia and eventually Europe. Without the harsh pressures of the Ice Age, humans might not have dispersed so widely or so quickly. 2. The reoccupation of Europe. During each glacial maximum, much of Europe became uninhabitable. When the glaciers receded, humans returned, explored newly opened territories, and new cultural groups emerged. 3. Settlement of the Americas via the Bering Land Bridge. When glaciers lowered sea levels, a massive land bridge, Beringia, emerged between Asia and Alaska. Humans crossed it and reached the Americas. The peopling of the American continents was one of the most significant outcomes of the Ice Age. Cultural consequences of environmental pressure. Migration changed far more than geography. It reshaped culture, language, and social structures. Communities entering new lands encountered unfamiliar animals and plants. New environments led to new tool types, new hunting techniques, new forms of shelters. Groups that met exchanged both genes and culture. Humanity's defining trait, adaptability, reached its peak during this era.
Migration and storytelling. Interestingly, migrating communities developed stronger storytelling and oral traditions. Because migrating peoples needed stories to remember new lands, pass on dangerous routes, preserve collective memory. In the dark and cold nights of the Ice Age, stories told around the fire formed the earliest cultural backbone of humanity.
Conclusion. The climate shifted, humanity moved forward. The Ice Age kept humans on the move. The force that pushed our species across continents, created diverse cultures, and ultimately allowed modern humans to inhabit the entire world was the relentless, unforgiving variability of the climate. Children in the Ice Age, education, games, and coming-of-age rituals. The harsh climate and difficult living conditions of the Ice Age shaped children's lives just as deeply as adults. Yet even in this challenging era, children were not simply part of the struggle for survival. They were carriers of culture, tradition, and knowledge within their communities. From a very early age, they learned through observation, play, and ritual, gradually becoming full members of their groups. Education of children, lessons for survival. Education in the Ice Age was not a formal system like today. It happened naturally through daily life. Primary methods of learning were observation and imitation. Children learned by watching adults hunt, skin animals, prepare hides, gather plants, and make fire. Hands-on practice. They used child-sized tools, small bows, light spears, little baskets, to practice skills safely. Oral teaching. Elders passed on knowledge about hunting strategies, dangerous areas, and useful plants through storytelling. Role of mothers and fathers. Mothers typically taught gathering, shelter organization, hide processing, thread making, and other domestic skills. Fathers and male relatives taught hunting, tracking, reading animal behavior, and making traps. This division was common, though not universal, among hunter-gatherer groups.
Children's games. Play as preparation for life. Children's games in the Ice Age were not merely entertainment, they were essential training for adulthood. Common types of games. Mini hunting games. Children made targets from stones and practiced shooting with small arrows. Hide-and-seek-like games. These improved camouflage skills, silent movement, and environmental awareness. Imitation games. Children reenacted hunting scenes, animal herds, or community rituals. Physical contests. Running, throwing stones, climbing, and balancing strengthened endurance. Toys. Archaeological findings show toys that doubled as teaching tools. Animal-shaped bone or stone carvings. Mini spears and bows. Small leather balls. Rattle-like tools made from animal bones.
Children's position in society. A child belonged not only to their parents, but to the entire community. In groups of 25 to 40 people, every child was vital. Why were children so important? They were the future hunters and gatherers. They carried cultural memory. Survival of the group depended on the next generation. Because infant and child mortality was always a threat, communities invested great effort in keeping children alive.
Adolescence and coming-of-age rituals. Growing up was marked by rituals that signaled the transition from childhood to adulthood. Rituals for boys. First hunt ritual. A boy proved adulthood by successfully hunting his first animal alone. Tests of endurance. Spending a night in the cold, tracking an animal, long-distance runs. Body markings. Faces and bodies were painted with red ochre, charcoal, or animal fat. Rituals for girls. First menstruation ceremonies. Private rituals led by the women of the community. Preparation for motherhood. Learning plant knowledge, making clothing, and taking on community responsibilities. Protective ornaments. Bracelets, tooth necklaces, and braided hairstyles. For both genders, rituals represented social and spiritual acceptance. Children and mythology. Children preserved the myths of the Ice Age. Stories told around the fire included animal ancestors, nature spirits, brave hunters, founders of the tribe, cautionary tales about dangers. These stories served as moral lessons, warnings, and survival guides. Conclusion: building the next generation. In Ice Age societies, children were not merely small bodies preparing for survival. They were the keepers of memory, culture, and hope. Through play, they grew strong. Through hands-on learning, they gained skill. And through rituals, they gained identity. Thanks to them, each generation managed to survive the unforgiving climate for thousands of years. Mythology, the spirit world, and the role of shamans in the Ice Age. For Ice Age humans, the world was not limited to the glaciers, the wind, the dark forests, or the animals they hunted. Their entire environment, mountains, caves, rivers, animal herds, the sky, was woven into a spiritual web of meaning. To them, nature was alive. The sound of the wind, the rumble of a falling stone, the tremor of migrating animals, or the darkness of the night sky were all interpreted as signs of invisible forces. To understand and gain some control over this dangerous and unpredictable world, people relied on mythology, communication with spirits, and the guidance of shamans. Thus, shamans were the spiritual leaders, healers, and storytellers of Ice Age societies.
Foundations of Ice Age mythology. A nature-centered belief system. Ice Age humans were animists. They believed that everything, stones, trees, animals, storms, possessed a spirit. The most respected powers included the spirits of great game animals, mammoth, bison, reindeer, horse, mountain and ice spirits, river and lake spirits, the spirit of fire, sky and star spirits. Because the climate was harsh and survival depended on hunting, people paid special attention to the spirits of large animals. A successful hunt was believed to depend on the goodwill of these spirits. Stories and creation myths. Although each group had its own myths, many shared similar themes. The world was once a vast sea of ice, and the gods broke this ice to reveal the land beneath. Humans were created from the body of an animal. After death, souls rose into the northern lights. Traces of these beliefs appear in cave paintings, bone carvings, and ritual masks. The spirit world. Invisible beings. Ice Age communities believed that an unseen world of spirits constantly influenced their lives. Protective spirits. Every person, especially hunters, was thought to have a guardian spirit that guided them during hunts, warned them of danger, appeared in their dreams. These protective spirits often took the form of an animal: wolf, bear, eagle, reindeer, a fierce owl. Malevolent spirits. Cold, dark nights, storms, and the deep cracks in the ice were believed to harbor malevolent spirits. These beings were thought to bring sickness, scare away game, bring misfortune to the camp. This is why the night fire was sacred. Fire kept evil spirits away. Communication with the spirit realm. Communicating with spirits was the exclusive role of shamans. Contact usually involved incense and smoke, rhythmic drumming, primitive flutes, leather masks, animal skins. These tools helped the shaman bridge the visible and invisible worlds. The role and power of shamans. Shamans in Ice Age societies were not just spiritual leaders, they were also healers, observers of nature, psychologists, ritual specialists, and keepers of cultural memory. How was a shaman chosen? Shamans were rarely chosen randomly. Certain signs revealed potential shamans: severe childhood illnesses, frequent vivid dreams, a sense of special connection with animals, falling into trances during lightning storms, a preference for solitude. A youth showing these traits would be trained by the elder shaman. Duties of the shaman. Shamans held many responsibilities. 1. Leading hunting rituals. Before the hunt, rituals were performed to ask permission from animal spirits. After a hunt, the animal spirit had to be honored. 2. Healing illnesses as spiritual attacks. The shaman entered a trance with drum rhythms and attempted to retrieve the patient's lost or weakened soul. 3. Maintaining morale. In harsh winters, after losses, or during scarcity, the shaman was the source of emotional resilience. 4. Interpreting the future. Shamans interpreted dreams, predicted animal migrations, and read subtle signs in nature. 5.
appeasing nature spirits. During storms, intense cold, or unsuccessful hunts, offerings were made to calm the spirits.
Magic, masks, and sacred symbols. Ritual masks. Shamans wore animal skin masks during rituals. These masks symbolized merging with the spirit of the hunted animal, scaring away harmful spirits, providing reassurance to the community. Masks were typically decorated with horns, feathers, charcoal markings, and red ochre paint.
The shaman's drum. The drum was sacred in Ice Age societies. Its rhythm carried the shaman's spirit into the other world. It was usually made from reindeer hide, a wooden frame, a bone beater. Sacred symbols. Some patterns in cave art are believed to represent shamanic symbols. Handprints, spiritual signatures. Dot patterns, as in star maps. Animal herds, or ancestral guides. And mysterious scratches, or ritual markers. Death and the journey of the soul. For Ice Age people, death was the soul's passage into another realm. The soul's ascent. The northern lights, aurora borealis, were interpreted as souls dancing in the sky. Burial traditions. Shamans oversaw burial rituals. The body was painted with red ochre, symbolizing life. Weapons, stone knives, and necklaces were placed in the grave. In some groups, food offerings were added. These items were believed to help the soul on its journey. Shamans and community identity. For their communities, shamans were not only spiritual guides, but also keepers of history, storytellers, knowledge bearers of migration routes, early warning observers of danger, the emotional foundation of the group. When a shaman died, the community entered deep mourning. Until a new shaman was chosen, rituals remained incomplete.
Conclusion. The invisible world of the Ice Age. Ice Age humans lived within a vast spiritual universe extending beyond the physical world. Myths, rituals, and shamans were the bridges that connected them to this unseen realm. The wind spoke, animals taught, the earth breathed. People sought harmony with the universe by respecting and appeasing the spirits. The technological framework of the Ice Age. The entire Ice Age was a period of rapid technological advancement for humans. This era contains levels of intelligence and creativity that would surprise many. The Stone Technology Revolution. Stone tools were the primary technology of Ice Age humans. These tools were far more sophisticated than a simple piece of flint. The methods were highly advanced. Core techniques. Flaking. A technique of striking stone at specific angles to remove flakes and create sharp edges. Lavawa technique. A highly advanced engineering method that began in Africa and spread across Eurasia, where the shape of the flake was pre-planned before removal. Pressure flaking. Seen in advanced cultures such as the Clovis, this technique produced thin, perfectly symmetrical spear and arrow points. Stone tools produced. Cutting blades, scrapers, drills, spear points, microliths, tiny stone pieces used in composite tools. Microlith technology was especially important. These tiny pieces were lined along the edges of a spear or arrow shaft, creating a sharp and durable weapon. Wood and bone technology. Ice Age humans were skilled not only with stone,
but also with organic materials. Bone and antler tools, harpoons, fish hooks, needles, spear tips, piercing awls, bone knives. The invention of bone needles was revolutionary. It allowed people to create tightly sewn clothing, dramatically improving protection against the cold. Wood technology. Wood was a scarce resource in many Ice Age regions, making it extremely valuable. Wood was used for spear shafts, bow frames, shelter frames, digging sticks, fire-carrying containers. Weapon technology, the key to hunting. The megafauna of the Ice Age, mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant bison, were difficult and dangerous to hunt. As a result, weapon technology evolved constantly. Spear technology. Two main types of spears existed: throwing spears, lighter, and thrusting spears for close combat. Spear throwers, atlatl, invented about 20,000 years ago. This device acted as an extension of the arm and increased throwing power 2 to 3 times. Greatly extended range. Allowed hunters to strike from a safer distance. This was one of humanity's earliest forms of mechanical power amplification. Bow and arrow technology. The bow appeared approximately 15,000 to 20,000 years ago. It was one of the greatest technological leaps of the Ice Age. Advantages: silent, long-distance killing, high damage via microlith-lined arrowheads, easier coordination in group hunts. Fire technology. Fire was not only a source of warmth, it was central to technology, culture, and survival. Fire-making methods. Flint plus pyrite spark technique. Wood friction fire starting. Bow drill fire technique. The bow drill made fire production faster and more controlled. Technological contributions of fire. Increased nutritional value of cooked plants and meat. Improved leather processing. Hardened stone tools through heat treatment. Lit pamps and deterred predators. Clothing technology. Armor against the cold. Ice Age fashion was not simple. It involved highly advanced techniques. Leather processing, drying, salting, oiling, scraping, softening. These methods were used to produce fur parkas, leather boots, gloves, hoods, and full-body layered clothing. Modern Inuit clothing is essentially a continuation of Ice Age tradition. Footwear technology. Footwear typically featured fur inner lining, leather outer surface, waterproof oil coating. Such details were essential for survival in -40°C conditions. Shelter technology. Shelters were not merely walls against wind and snow. They were engineered to retain heat. Mammoth bone dwellings. Massive shelters made of mammoth bones have been found in Eastern Europe. They featured circular arrangements of mammoth bones, coverings of hides and fur, a constantly burning fire inside. These structures created warm, stable living spaces. Snow shelters. In northern regions, snow blocks were shaped into shelters, essentially early versions of igloos. Cave habitation. Caves provided natural protection from wind and cold and were widely used.
Stone slab ovens and cooking technology. Ice Age humans mastered the management of heat. Pit ovens. Heated stones were placed in a pit, food was added, and the pit was covered with soil. This method slow-cooked meat, made food more digestible,
neutralized toxins in plants. Rock ovens. Food was cooked on heated stone slabs.
Transport technology. Transport was vital for nomadic life. Tools included hide carrying sacks, wooden sled drag devices, framed back baskets, bone sled runners for ice, hunting traps, and engineering. Ice Age people developed trap engineering as sophisticated as their hunting. Examples include pit traps, weighted rock traps, stone rows to redirect herds, spear traps at narrow passages. These were highly effective for capturing large animals. Long-distance trade technology. The movement of stone axes, obsidian, and carved mammoth ivory over hundreds of kilometers shows that humans had mapping knowledge, navigational skills, communication and signaling systems. Conclusion: how technology shaped the Ice Age. Ice Age humans were tool engineers, clothing designers, shelter architects, hunting tacticians, fire specialists. Their sophistication proves that the creative intelligence of modern humans has very ancient roots.
Diseases, treatments, and primitive medicine in the Ice Age. As Ice Age societies struggled against the harsh forces of nature, they faced not only cold, hunger, and predators, but also a wide range of diseases. In a world without modern medicine, healing depended on luck, natural resilience, herbal knowledge learned through experience, and the rituals of shamans. This extensive section explains in detail which diseases Ice Age humans encountered, how they treated them, which natural methods they used, and how early medicine began to develop.
Types of diseases in the Ice Age. Respiratory diseases. Respiratory infections were among the most common illnesses in cold climate communities. Bronchitis and pneumonia. Inhaling freezing air often caused inflammation in the lungs. Upper respiratory infections. Cough, shortness of breath, and fever were frequent in people exposed to wind or long periods of snow travel. Asthma-like symptoms. Smoky interiors of tents caused chronic coughing, especially in children. Skin diseases. Constant exposure to cold heavily strained the skin. Frostbite, tissue death on fingers, nose, and ears. Cracks and wounds. Dry skin easily split and became infected. Eczema-like inflammation. Inner surfaces of hide clothing sometimes triggered allergic reactions. Digestive system diseases. Food poisoning and parasite infections were very common. Raw meat, poorly cooked meat could spread parasites like trichinella. Contaminated water. Meltwater was not always clean. Diarrhea and stomach infections were frequent. Plant poisoning. Misidentified herbs cause severe intoxication. Muscle and bone diseases. Skeletal remains give us important insights. Chronic muscle strain, hunting, long-distance walking, and making stone tools caused constant pain. Joint wear. Osteoarthritis in knees and shoulders was extremely common. Fractures. Animal attacks, falls, and accidents often resulted in broken bones. Infectious diseases. Large epidemics were rare due to small, scattered populations. However, leprosy-like bacterial diseases, tuberculosis, gum infections, parasite-related skin issues have been detected in various groups. Dental health and tooth diseases. Dental problems were among the greatest challenges for Ice Age humans. Wear and cavities.
Cutting meat with stone tools resulted in extremely worn teeth. Eating gritty roots and bark wore down enamel. Cavities were rare in early Homo sapiens, but increased with the transition to agriculture. Tooth extraction and early surgery. Archaeological evidence shows intentional tooth removal. Stone wedge tools loosened the tooth. Tendons were used to pull the tooth out in one swift motion. Pain-relieving herbs were chewed. Smoke sometimes sterilized the exposed area.
First medical tools and surgical practices. Stone scalpels. Sharp obsidian flakes were used to open skin or abscesses. They could be as sharp as modern surgical scalpels. Their smooth microstructure reduced infection risk. Bone needles. Bone or thorns functioned as primitive needles, used for stitching wounds, draining abscesses, small surgical interventions, trepanation, or drilling the skull. One of the oldest known surgeries in human history. Headaches, migraines, and trauma-induced confusion were attributed to evil spirits. A small hole was slowly carved into the skull to relieve pressure. Many patients survived. Healing marks prove it. This suggests Ice Age humans were more advanced surgically than we assume.
Herbal medicine. Nature's pharmacy. Ice Age communities carefully observed plants and passed down knowledge of healing. Painkillers. Elm and willow bark contained salicin, similar to aspirin. Wild poppy provided mild numbing effects for severe injuries. Antibacterial and antiseptic remedies. Thyme and sage-like herbs brewed as teas for throat issues. Juniper smoke, burned to disinfect tent interiors. Honey salve, applied to wounds for its antibacterial effects. Digestive aids. Mint and wild fennel eased gas and stomach pain. Root decoctions helped replenish fluids after diarrhea or vomiting. Cold injury treatments. Animal fat mixtures applied to prevent frostbite. Heated stones used to warm the abdomen and feet.
Shamanic medicine, spirits and healing. Ice Age medicine was not limited to physical treatments. Spiritual healing was equally important. How shamans understood disease. Most illnesses were interpreted as evil spirits, angry ancestors, or loss of soul. Someone who appeared weak or depressed was often believed to have lost part of their spirit. Ritual treatments. Incense burning. Bone drums. Shamans entering trance to call back the patient's spirit. Protective amulets made from bones. Herbal plus ritual combination. Shamans often treated both body and spirit. Herbal painkillers first, followed by long healing rituals. This significantly aided psychological recovery. Hygiene and preventive methods. Ice Age humans lacked modern hygiene, but developed effective survival methods. Boiling water. Some groups realized boiled water was safer. Hand cleaning. Rubbing hands with snow. Mixing ash with water to clean helped reduce bacteria. Cleaning wounds. Salty water solutions. Urine. Sterile. Fermented alcoholic liquids were used for wound cleansing.
Infections and survival rates. Although many died from infections, those who survived were stronger in immunity, knowledgeable in herbal treatments, able to perform minor surgery,
raised in resilient communities. Archaeology shows that many individuals recovered from major fractures, proving strong social care systems.
The role of medicine in community identity. Medicine in the Ice Age was deeply tied to beliefs, culture, rituals, and lifestyle. A healed individual meant a stronger community. Healers, shamans, and plant-gatherer women were highly respected.
Social hierarchy, leadership, and community structures in the Ice Age. Throughout the Ice Age, the survival of human communities depended not only on physical endurance, but also on the social order and division of duties established within the group. Harsh climate conditions, scarce resources, constantly shifting animal migrations, and ever-present dangers created a system in which every individual, every family, and every generation depended on one another. This section examines in detail how Ice Age people organized themselves, how leadership worked, how social roles formed, and how communities lived together. Basic structure of communities. Small but strongly connected groups. Ice Age humans typically lived in small, mobile, family-based groups. Average group size. Groups of 20 to 40 people were the most common. Larger groups were unsustainable in terms of food gathering and mobility. When population increased, the group usually split into two. Family structure. Instead of nuclear families, extended family units were more common. Siblings, cousins, uncles, aunts, and their children lived together. These kinship bonds created reliable partnerships in hunting and defense. The effect of mobility. Social structure was not fixed. The migrations of prey animals determined the movement of the people. Communities lived in short-term camps lasting a few weeks, seasonal long-term shelters, winter refuges, caves, rock shelters. Mobility required the whole group to move together. This naturally discouraged conflict. Disharmony threatened survival.
Decision-making. How leadership functioned. In Ice Age societies, leadership was usually situational and based on consensus rather than a rigid hierarchy. Did a main leader exist? Yes, but not in a modern sense. Leadership was not based on elections, force, or permanent titles. A person became a leader depending on the situation. Hunting leader, camp-building leader, defense leader during danger, spiritual or medical leader, shaman. Leadership emerged from natural authority rather than imposed power. Qualities expected of leaders. Experience, especially in hunting. Calm and strategic thinking. Physical strength, but not the only criterion. Intelligence and navigation skills. Trust from the community. Generosity in sharing the hunt. A leader was only a leader if the group accepted them.
The culture of consensus. Groups were small, so authoritarian rule was impossible. Important decisions were typically made through group discussions around the fire. Elders and experienced hunters had significant influence. If a consensus could not be reached, the group sometimes split. This was a natural solution. The social authority of shamans. Shamans were not only spiritual guides, but also guardians of social order. Healing and spiritual guidance. The shaman interpreted illnesses. They were respected for their perceived ability to fight evil spirits. Their rituals boosted morale and unity within the group. Political influence of shamans. Their opinions were important for migration decisions, hunting seasons, and evaluating dangers. They cooperated with leaders, but were not necessarily leaders themselves. Was shamanism hereditary? Evidence suggests it often appeared in young people seen as chosen. Family tradition could play a role, but it was not a requirement. Shamans served as the memory keepers of the community.
Gender roles and division of labor. Gender dynamics in Ice Age societies were very different from modern assumptions. What did men do? Leading large hunts, protecting the group, long-distance scouting, crafting heavy tools and stone weapons. What did women do? Contrary to outdated assumptions, women played diverse and crucial roles, gathering high-protein plants, maintaining medicinal plant knowledge, participating in small game hunting, educating children, tanning hides and making clothing, organizing camp and tending the fire. Women were likely the primary experts in medicine and plant use. Female hunters. Recent burial evidence shows some women joined large hunts. Some were buried with spears and arrowheads. Some carried signs of combat injuries. This demonstrates flexible gender roles. Social status. Who had a voice? In Ice Age societies, status was based on contribution and experience rather than power. Hunting success. Successful hunters, male or female, gained respect. Those who shared their catch generously earned prestige. Elders. Although elders were the slowest during migrations, they were invaluable. They held knowledge about plants, geography, animal behavior, climate cycles, dangerous regions. The community's survival depended on their memory. Craftspeople. Stone tool makers, arrowhead specialists, leather workers, and clothing makers all held high status, as a group without proper equipment was doomed. Conflicts, competition, and internal tensions. Even though cooperation was essential, conflict sometimes occurred. Resource competition. Scarcity increased tension. Failed hunts could lead to leadership disputes and temporary shifts in authority. Family rivalries. Mate selection sometimes caused conflict between families. Signs of violence. Archaeological evidence shows skull trauma from human conflict, spear wounds, healing marks after injury, indicating that interpersonal violence did occur.
Alliances and hostilities between groups. Ice Age humans did not live in isolation. Friendship and marriage bonds. Intergroup marriages preserved genetic diversity, crucial for survival. Trade and knowledge exchange. Groups traded obsidian, flint, seashells. They shared hunting techniques, plant knowledge, and tool designs. Hostilities. Conflicts were caused by competition over hunting grounds, overlapping migration routes, and access to seasonal resources.
Mechanisms for group unity. Rituals, dances, and stories. Cultural activities held communities together. Fire circle storytelling. Young people learned hunting strategies. The community's history, myths, and identity were passed on. Ritual dances. Pre-hunt success dances. Rituals for rain, luck, and protection. Peace dances between groups. These strengthened emotional bonds and eased tensions. Cultural identity. Rituals served as expressions of who they were and where they belonged. Conclusion.
Ice Age social order was far more complex than expected. Ice Age societies were small but resilient, flexible yet role-structured, shared leadership-oriented, surprisingly flexible in gender roles, nomadic but culturally rich, knowledge-based in hierarchy. This social system was one of the key reasons humanity survived thousands of years of harsh climate.